Suresh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me properly?
Yes. Olá, muito boa noite a todos e todas. Sejam bem-vindos à nossa quinta mesa do Seminário Internacional Paulo Freire, um século ensinando, resistindo e emancipando. Agora nós vamos dar continuidade à nossa programação de hoje, a nossa mesa das 19 horas. Vamos dar início à Conferência Magistral com o Embaixador da Índia, Suresh Reddy, juntamente com a sua assessora Brenda Seixas, que está aqui nos bastidores. Embaixador, é uma honra tê-lo conosco. Encerro aqui minha fala e passo a palavra para o senhor.
Seven o'clock table. Okay, now I can speak, I think. Danielle is welcoming you, sir. She thank you for having you in the table of the 7 o'clock from the International Seminar of Paulo Freire. And to follow the program, she just introduced you, and you are able to speak now and do your presentation.
Should I speak now? Shall I?
Yeah, you can start, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela. And I want to thank the State University of Rio for inviting me to speak today on Paulo Freire, the educator and philosopher. We recently celebrated the 100th anniversary of Paulo Freire on September 19th. The world has changed over the last 100 years, and more so since the publication of the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. The world has changed, but the issues which Paulo Freire was trying to address continue to exist. The biggest strength of Freire's work was that he pointed out the structural inequalities in society and saw the problems where it lay. Last year and also this year, we have had more than 1.5 billion students facing the challenge of closed schools in more than 188 countries. The impact on the students has been devastating, and especially on the students from the economically weakest sections of the society and who do not have any other educational opportunities for education beyond the schooling. The schooling provides essential learning, and when the schools close, the children are denied of the opportunity for growth and development. Not only was education disrupted, but the children also missed out on the free meals which was being provided by the schools, and they were also exposed to greater violence, exploitation, and many times dropped out of the school for good. The teachers and their parents were equally challenged in their ability to provide meaningful distance education and to support the process. And the COVID pandemic has created another critical complication, which is the digital divide. The online schooling has generated its own inequality because of the economic discrimination due to questions over affordability. After more than a century of trying to make education viable for all. We also saw the recent Black Lives Matter movement. We have been witnessing increasing xenophobia, racism, hatred, and violence in many parts of the world. In this backdrop, the work of Paulo Freire becomes even more relevant in today's context. He introduced the concept of oppression and did not talk of poverty, which was an apolitical concept. He spoke of oppressed people's rights to land, housing, water, voting, etc. His work was largely with the weakest sections of the society, and especially the peasants, farmers, where he introduced the concept of deep literacy, which helped and enabled people to recognize their position in society versus the contradictions in the society. His work was with adult illiterates on literacy, and which was evidently a requirement to vote those days. His idea of banking concept of education was quite remarkable as it analyzed the problem. And education, which was simply about memorizing facts which did not in any way change the oppressive environment in which people lived and which was dehumanizing. Not only did he analyze the problem, but also gave a solution, a problem posing education, which helped people to understand their existence in society and enabled them to come out of it. Dialogue and conscientization were two important concepts which he introduced towards his end. He was very popular amongst the revolutionaries in developing societies, and his book on pedagogy of the oppressed is today perhaps the third most cited academic work globally. His educational method was eminently political, ethical, humanistic, and democratic, rooted in the everydayness. The emphasis on politics, ethics, and public responsibility of education, and importantly educators, makes Freire's work even more relevant in today's context. The Paulo Freire method incorporated the political element into the education, working with words that were part of the students' daily life and sufferings. The questions led the students to reflect on their living conditions and to identify the oppression in which they found themselves. Hence, Freire left an important legacy in the organization of the working class in many countries, including in Brazil and in India, and formation of popular social movements, trade unions, and political philosophy. Evidently, his legacy goes beyond Brazilian borders and influenced several Latin American countries, many African countries, and his influence was very sharp in India also. Freire and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, shared similar ideas on education and liberation. A very important aspect of Gandhian concept of education is a deeper understanding of how he viewed inequity and discrimination, which was connected to the bigger politics of knowledge. Gandhi was always a proponent of knowledge democracy and advocated for knowledge to be open, owned, viewed, and disseminated by everybody. The idea of knowledge equity has slowly and steadily now become stronger in the education policies in India, and it has become an important component in the socially and economically disadvantaged groups' approach to the education. Gandhi's advocacy for equity and inclusion in education was also directed at marginalized communities, including people with no literacy, the weakest sections of the society, as well as other disadvantaged groups. His life and principles have repeatedly resonated the importance of local knowledge and local wisdom. A very crucial tool of exploring the local wisdom is through the means of language, something that Gandhi has passionately talked about, and something which Freire also was passionate about in terms of using the local day-to-day experiences and enabling them to become literate. The new education policy of India, the NEP 2020, has a well-detailed section on the critical role played by language, and especially of the mother tongue, and the process of learning and the critical process of literacy itself. And importantly, it states that the better they become at relating to the realities around them, the better and more literate they become. The idea of equity and inclusion cannot be seen in isolation and has to be contextualized in the bigger imagination of the communities. Gandhi believed that schools and education system should be intricately tied to the societies in which they live. Very much similar to what Freire has been talking about. And the national education policy of India, it also has laid particular emphasis on the development of the individual, the development of the creative potential of each individual. It is based on the principle that education must develop not only the cognitive abilities, both the foundational capacities of literacy and numeracy, but also critical thinking and problem solving, but more importantly, the social, ethical, and emotional capacities of the individual. It states, the education policy in India states that the education in its primitive form of rote learning, exactly what Freire was talking about, the banking of education, does not lead to the expected outcomes of human development. In order to change this reality, the new education policy has put this kind of education in the backseat. The concept of banking of education, it has put it in the backseat and has come out with a new policy in terms of giving a more holistic approach to education, involving the individual and the society at large. Paulo Freire said that education should be such which should lead to democratization of culture, a program which itself would be an act of creation, capable of realizing other creative acts, one in which students would develop the impatience and vivacity which characterizes search and innovation. The empowering or liberating education, Freire suggests, is not a new data bank or doctrine which is delivered to the students. It is instead a democratic and transformative relationship between students and teachers, and students and learning, and students and society. Freire continues to be the guiding philosopher for teachers across the globe and for just about anyone who is searching for a sense of justice in an unjust world. Today, after 100 years, the challenge remains the same. How do we make the weakest sections part of the mainstream society through education? The COVID crisis has made the crucial role of educators more explicit, not only in their impact on the current challenges, but also in their capacity to shape a different future. I believe that time has come for us to relook at Paulo Freire's work and make them even more important element in our approach to education. And after 100 years, when we look back, we realize that these challenges which Paulo Freire identified, the structural inequalities that was promoting the inequalities in the society, continue to exist, and the pandemic has only brought them to the surface. And again, I'd like to thank the State University of Rio for inviting me to speak today on this occasion. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada a todos e todas que assistiram, todo mundo que está online, e também as pessoas que vão assistir depois, né, a nossa gravação. Muito obrigada ao Embaixador, Suresh, Reddy, e a Brenda também, que está dando suporte. Thank you so much. Aguardamos vocês nas próximas mesas. Amanhã também temos mais. E durante a semana estaremos online, tá bom? Muito obrigada a todos e uma boa noite para vocês. Obrigada, Brenda.
Obrigada, Ambassador. She's just thank you everyone for being here, watching this table, and all the people who are going to watch it later because it's going to be saved on the YouTube channel. And she thanks for your speech, really great words about Paulo Freire, and also hopes everyone comes back tomorrow for another round of seminars and important speakers that are going to have. She thanks you once again for taking your time to be here and wishes you a good night to everyone.
Muito obrigada a todos. Obrigada a todo mundo do suporte também. Um grande beijo e boa noite. Pode falar.
Thank you.
Obrigada, boa noite.